Hey guys, welcome to the second video where I am going to explain now what I would like you to do. So practice number one includes the 5 steps for critical reading that we went over. So we covered annotating reading, reading actively, understanding authorial and opening context, understanding what we are reading, and recognizing counter arguments. So when I post this workshop, I will also include this PowerPoint so that you can download it and you can look at each slide carefully. And then I would like you, for practice number one, to choose 2 of these steps from the 5. So you're choosing 2 of them. You don't have to do all 5, just 2 of them. Now, if you choose number 1, which is annotating reading, I would like you to find a short poem or a song lyric and annotate it. If you don't like that and you would like to do, let's say, like a page of a story, I'm fine with that as well. You can annotate using Google Docs' annotating features or Microsoft Word's annotating features, or you could even do just like a line-by-line annotation. If you go back to the slide and look at the way that the student did her annotation, you'll be able to see that the student did it just by hand. And you can do that too, and then you can upload a picture of your work. So that's number 1 if that's the step you would like to practice. Number 2 is reading actively. So I would like you to choose a short story or a novel and identify its theme. And again, the theme is the main idea, the main subject that the writer is writing about. But extra challenge, I want you to write me a thesis. So I don't just want you to identify the theme, but also show how the theme is being developed in that particular work. So you could do a short story, you could do a novel. If you want, you can also do a film. Step 3, I put over here understanding authorial and opening context. I thought let's make this current and interesting. Why not? Find a tweet from maybe a public figure. And the tweet might be about a specific event or a person. And the thing is, I'm saying a tweet because tweets are from people's thoughts, and these thoughts are always in dialogue, and there's always some kind of conversation going on. So I think these tweets are wonderful ways to practice context. So I would like you to contextualize the tweet. I'm talking about who, what, when, where, and even why or how. Step 4 is understanding what you read. So what I would like you to do is find a paragraph from a short story or a poem, and then I would like you to just define everything that you don't understand. So I'm talking about interpreting lines, defining words. You might want to look at connotations of words as well, not just the denotation, the dictionary definition, but also the connotation, the way that the words take on different meanings as a result of our society and culture. And step 5, recognize counter arguments. If you decide to choose this one, find a criticism of a story, and it could be in literature and film as well if you want. I would like you to identify what this person is criticizing. What's their problem? So we get this a lot with a lot of film critics. Like a film is released and a critic hates it and they give it a thumbs down, and then they write this entire article bashing the movie and the writing and the acting and so on. I want you to find me one of those. It doesn't have to be about film. It could be about a novel or a comic or whatever you're interested in. And I would like you to identify what that opponent is saying, what the person is criticizing, but also how you would refute that. So I'm really looking to see how you are able to tackle a counter argument. These are 5 very different practices, and I want you to choose 2 of them for your practice number 1. So again, you're going to be writing this maybe on a separate Google Docs page just because it saves automatically. Practice number 1, and go ahead and put the 2 steps that you are going to be doing, and then of course your work underneath. I put over here, make sure to show your work and explain how you're demonstrating the step in your chosen example. Don't just like copy paste something and think that that's your work. You have to explain how it's a demonstration of the step that is really making you a stronger critical reader. If you guys want, you should press pause on this video, do your practice 1, and then we will be ready to move on to our second practice. All right, now we are ready for steps 6 through 10. Now, step 6 says, look for biases, hidden assumptions, or distinct values. This is going to be in the writers, and obviously, a writer is not perfect. A writer is really a product of his or her society. So I think it's wise and well informed to know that, everyone has bias. Everyone, even if you try not to, you have some sort of bias. So I put over here a good way. This is like a way to cross-check where the author's coming from. I put identify and avoid biases and hidden assumptions by checking the author's age, sex, education, ethnic background. Also think about values, and I put the values might not be explicit, they could also be implicit. They might be implied in the text. Here's an example. I did not identify the author. When you read this example, it makes absolute sense. The whole world of nature is a mighty struggle between strength and weakness, an eternal victory of the strong over the weak. There would be nothing but decay in the whole of nature if this were not so. States which should offend against the elementary law would fall into decay. There's a reason why I did not identify the author, because I wanted you to maybe see if you can guess the author. And if you did guess Hitler, you are absolutely right. The reason why I did not identify the author to begin with is because the text itself makes sense. The text itself is logical. There's even when you read it, probably most of us might even agree with some of the content, right? But when you apply who wrote it, when they wrote it, what this person's goal was, it suddenly becomes a little bit more eye-opening, because it doesn't always have to be a person like Hitler. It could just be like an average Joe that is, happens to be experiencing, life in a different way than you. But obviously the way that they are applying their values into the work is noteworthy. And that's what a good, strong, critical reader will do. Will be able to track these biases, will be able to see the assumptions that the writer has, or will be able to identify some of the key values in the writer's text. All right, step 7. Can you separate emotion from fact? A lot of people say yes, but when you go on Twitter, it's a whole different story. People are always getting offended over one thing or another. So I put over here, evaluate an argument using logic and reason instead of being carried away by emotion. Now, I sound very heartless when I say that, and pathos is a good persuasive strategy in writing, but excessive pathos is not. So I think it's important when we read a story that we try to divorce ourselves from our own time period. We live in the world 2020. Things are crazy right now. And I think 20 years later, when people look back at the world 2020, they might have a tough time understanding what exactly we're going through. So I think it's very important for us to be able to contextualize properly, but then also in reference to that context, do not apply excessive emotions. So I put an example from A Rose for Emily, and obviously this is from Faulkner, and there's a line in here where he uses the word Negro, and this word is not used anymore in of course our everyday language, especially in our current society. But I think it's important to know that this story was published in the 1930s, and I think when you go and you do a little bit of research, you realize this is pre-civil rights era. Of course, at this point, Black people were no longer slaves, but things were not great for them. So when Faulkner is referring to a manservant who happens to be Black and uses this word, it's important to understand the history behind it and to understand when he is writing this story and what is going on in the world of that story, not the world today that we live in, but the world of that story. So I do think sometimes, we bring our very modern, current feelings to the stories that are meant to be read quite differently. And this applies to honestly so many stories. Like I watched Hell on Wheels, and this is after the Civil War, and things are so different. Not only is there so much discrimination against Black people, but also Chinese people. And there's absolutely like no rights, even a trial that is being conducted in the show, on behalf of like, let's say a Chinese person, it's unjust, and then it's unfair, and it's not really cast out properly because they were considered a lesser being at that time. But instead of getting upset, I think it's important to understand the history. Again, this is hard to do. It's hard for me as well. I'm not like here preaching something that, I myself do every single day, all day. That's not a reality. We get upset a lot of times over things that are happening and things that we read, but it is important, especially in literature and reading literature, to become a stronger critical reader, to be able to separate the emotion from fact. All right, step 8. Now this is the part that I think is easier for you guys than maybe for people who were reading literature 20 years ago. So I'm writing here, look up facts for unfamiliar issues. You need to fill in your gaps of knowledge with research. So what does this mean? Well, you guys have Siri at your fingertips, at your disposal. You could just be like, hey Siri, and now there's, oh my gosh, my phone just turned on. My Siri just answered me. So that was so funny. So what I wanted to tell you guys is it's so much easier for you to research now than back in the days, when you had to like open up a book and actually do physical research. So sometimes when you're reading a text, you don't quite know why things are the way they are or what it means. Like this was a confusion for me. For example, I love Pride and Prejudice, but I didn't really understand when Jane Austen would write that this man had a large fortune, and she wrote that he had 4,000 to 5,000 pounds a year. I didn't understand why Mrs. Bennet was so excited when she was saying, "What a fine thing for our girls." I'm like, is 4,000 to 5,000 a year really good? I don't get it. So I did some research. Number 1, it's important to know that this novel is taking place in the 19th century England. Number 2, 4,000 to 5,000 a year puts Mr. Bingley at the top 1%. Number 3, what does that mean? If we translate that today, that would be about 700,000 K, or at most 866,000 K. That's a lot. That's almost $1 million. Point is, Mr. Bingley was indeed rich and would be a financial provider, a great one. So of course Mrs. Bennet has every right to be excited, as would any other mom.